When I first heard about the Giantess revival, mainly the additional seasons 7 and 8, I just moved on because to tell you the truth, the last time I talked about this show was mainly back in 2018 where I did my top 5 worst Giantess episodes. To tell you the truth, my expressions towards Giantess has changed, but at the same time, I haven't gone back to the show, and I still did not like the show for the mean-spirited tone. But when it comes to the revival, mainly after watching this episode, even if it's just one episode, Johnny's holiday light fight is honestly a bigger improvement Christmas episode in comparison to the other Christmas episode that was released back in 2011. Which is a Holly Johnny Christmas where Johnny needs to be on the nice list in order to get the extreme snowball making machine. With the episodes focusing on that, there's really nothing else I can say about the plot of this episode in comparison to the Revival Christmas episode, where the plot centers around Hugh trying to make the better decorations against the neighbors. Granted, it's not really much of a Revival Christmas episode when it comes to being a different plot in comparison to the 2011 Christmas episode, but to tell you the truth, after watching the Revival episode, it gave me the impression that the people who made the Revival were looking at the criticisms from seasons 1 through 6, since they worked on season 7 and season 8. Okay, to tell you the truth, since this is the first time I ever watched the Giantess Christmas episode from 2011, since I only watched commercials of it back at the day, then I'm just gonna say it right now. I understand that this show isn't supposed to be taken too seriously when it comes to its decisions and the fact that it plagiarizes ideals from other shows. Like, I can understand that people are highly against this show due to plagiarism, but since it's been 5.5 years, maybe, since I last talked about this show, I'm just gonna be real with you. I literally don't even care of what this show does, and to tell you the truth, doing a Cartoon Crisis 3 video or an episode review centering around Giantess just isn't really in my mind at this point in comparison to talking about other cartoons, which for me personally are worth talking about than this. But I'm not gonna lie, this episode, while not terrible, it's not good enough for the setting of these characters. Like, knowing how fast-paced this episode is, like really fast-paced, like I'm honestly surprised that this episode was a lot more fast-paced in comparison to the other episodes I've seen in the past. It really feels like that they just didn't know how to handle a concept centering around Giantess and Christmas, and considering that by the time this episode aired, Giantess has turned 6 years old. I'm talking about the TV series. And for this episode centering around Johnny trying to do good deeds while taking shortcuts by having his sisters make a snowball making machine that ends up becoming a lot more unstable, and this leads to him being on the naughty list, and this leads to havoc when it comes to them just trying to get Johnny's gift. To tell you the truth, if you guys are going to give me the impression that this family has know each other for so long that they admit that they're not really a fun-loving family and they've given up and they're just going to go along with whatever wacky thing is happening when it comes to Johnny doing something or his sister's doing something, then I'm gonna be real with you, then why do I need to bother talking about this episode? Since one of the biggest problems of this show is with the characters being either annoying or mean-spirited, then it's really obvious that it's difficult to root for Johnny or feel sympathy towards him when it comes to him getting a gift on Christmas. Ignoring the fact that he's getting older and the fact that he is supposed to be a lot more mature than usual, then I really felt like that this entire episode is only here for the sake of having a Christmas episode centering around Johnny Test. Let's be honest with you, sometimes when they hammer in the morals, despite the fact that the characters are really hateable, and it's just hammering in regardless, it really feels like that the direction of the show has no meaning to the point that they're only doing this for the sake of being diehard Johnny Test fans, because that's literally what I think whenever people are going back to the show when it comes to being a diehard. And since I wasn't really a diehard Johnny Test fan, then my expressions towards this franchise really shows that I haven't gone back to it in such a long time. But since that this is a versus video, not to mention the third of this week, I'm just gonna say right now that the Revival Christmas episode really feels like that they're really making Johnny way more likable, and despite with this episode being over the top like the last episode, it's not really over the top. Like, the gimmick of people setting up the Christmas decorations on see who has the best house with the better decorations, I can see that happening in the real world when it comes to people wanting to make Christmas really fancy when it comes to Christmas lights. And to be fair, I really adore Christmas lights. I can easily see these types of plots work when it comes to characters facing off each other, and considering that there's no contest whatsoever and it's mainly people taking pictures of Christmas lights, I have to admit, it's realistic on people taking pictures of Christmas lights, because I did that in the past. Even if it may have nothing to do with houses being decorated, it's mainly a garden of Christmas lights, it still feels accurate. And besides, since that most of the characters are likable for how they're portrayed in comparison to seasons 1 through 6, maybe after season 1 and 2, I really felt like that this episode was a lot more easy to get through. Like, the sound effects is a lot more accurate, which is no surprise of how Johnny Test ended up becoming what it is after season 1, but it's not that terrible. And with Hugh being likable in comparison to how he was in the earlier seasons, and to be perfectly fair, in the Christmas episode of 2011, Hugh wasn't hateable, I really felt like that this is honestly a change of pace on having a different plot centering around Christmas lights, rather than doing the same thing as before. Believe me when I say this, it's really rare to find episodes from shows that centers around Christmas lights, and no, I'm not talking about reality shows. And to be truthful, the animation, while not the best in the world, since it's mostly TV budget or Netflix budget, it's really good to look at. To tell you the truth, there was a lot of dedication in this animation, and since that it's been about 7 years since Johnny Test came to an end, they really had a major upgrade. Like, you can either compare this to the season 1 animation, since it was a lot more different, which is not Flash animation, but I'm gonna be really real with you that the animation in this Revival is a lot more interesting because it's not boring or lazy to look at. Then again, it's not saying much considering of how everything wrong with the original Johnny Test after season 1 maybe is really what causes everything to be difficult to sit through, and I'm honestly surprised that even after the troubles that they went through, they didn't improve the animation. Like, season 2, season 3 I can understand, but since that they're resorting to Flash animation after season 3, then I'm going to assume that they either wanted to have a job, which makes sense, but it doesn't change the fact that they're losing a really cheap budget. The only thing that the original Christmas episode had was a song called Merry Christmas, so to tell you the truth, I didn't like this song, and I've listened to much worse Christmas songs, but was it with these episodes always having a Christmas song? Like, I understand it's supposed to be the spirit of Christmas, but with a show like Johnny Test, it just doesn't fit, not even close. And to tell you the truth, it really feels like that they're really trying way too hard to do everything, and yet at the same time, with the fast-paced nature of this show, it's difficult to grow adjustment to nearly everything that happens, since it really causes the episode to drag down. Like I said before, these characters are literally the problem that really doesn't fit any of the elements on making a Christmas episode. Like, they're not terrible in this episode in comparison to the other episodes, but at the same time, they just do not fit this type of episode, no matter what show it is. As long as the characters are at least likable, even though that these characters are not hateable, it would make the episode better. I'm just saying. So when it comes to Johnny Test, mainly the character in the revival, the only thing I've seen from him when it comes to him being likable is mainly him being passionate on helping out Hugh, which is honestly weird considering that in the original, there was always a love-hate relationship, which is mostly hate that is way more in your face. But in this, it really feels like that they'll actually gain much more closer and knowing each other a lot more. Granted, they probably did that since the revival, but by the looks of it, it really feels like that they're intentionally trying to make Johnny likable in comparison of the 2011 Christmas episode. Like, whenever I think about these types of plots handling when it comes to these types of characters that we remember but not for the positive reasons, then it's honestly astonishing that this Johnny is a lot more understanding and trying to set things right for his family, especially during Christmas. And to tell you the truth, he's been a lot more on the nice list in comparison to how he was in the other episode. I understand that he did good deeds when it comes to giving charity, mainly giving money to charity, which is a lot more since that nobody has been giving any of the charity people money, but at the same time, that's literally mainly out of luck, and considering that the luck in this is mainly non-existent, it really feels like it really suits for Johnny's character, since that the odds against them when it comes to facing off the Naples' lights aren't mean-spirited in comparison to how they were in the other seasons. It made me understand that if I watch more episodes, if they're not mean-spirited, then it gave me the impression that this is mainly an improvement over the last several seasons. Well, aside from season 1. Like, you can make the argument that I need to watch more episodes from the revival in order to get an understanding of it, but for me personally, I was thinking about doing more Christmas episodes if I had the ability, and since I did have the ability to do Christmas this month, I decided to do a comparison of the Johnny Test episode from 2011 and comparing it to this episode. This week really feels like a Versus week despite being 3 videos instead of 5, but let's be honest with you, since that this month's Christmas isn't going to be anything special, well, it could be, but not as much as last year's or the year before that, then keep in mind, this really feels like this is one of the only ways I'm ever going to make this December schedule happen because I have little options. And when it comes to the scrap ideas that I did last year, only a couple can come back for this month. And since I never had the knowledge on comparing 2 Johnny Test episodes when it comes to a revival towards the original, there's always a new and always something that comes out of the ordinary. But for me personally, I won't be able to make this video if I decide to skip this month, and I probably won't be able to make this video for next year's. It's just mainly me not being into Johnny Test and just mainly moving on from it. With that being said, it's no surprise that the Revival episode is the superior episode over the 2011 episode. Like, this episode isn't bad and you may sit through it despite the song, but at the same time, if you're not into the show and you're not really into the characters that really drag the episode down despite them not being hateable in this, then I don't really blame you. So take my advice, go watch Johnny's Holiday Light Fight if you're a diehard fan or if you're really curious like I was. Because to tell you the truth, even if I still have to watch the show to see if it's not as mean-spirited as the older seasons, my priorities are really low. So for me personally, this is gonna be the only time I'm ever going to come back to Johnny Test, mainly due to the revival. I'm giving a Holly Johnny Christmas a 5 out of 10, while Johnny's Holiday Light Fight gets a 7 out of 10.